This episode of Legacy Curious is brought to you by Legacy Protectors. Customize insurance strategies for business owners and families who aspire to create a lasting legacy. Hello there, and welcome to Legacy Curious, the show where we explore what it really means to protect, grow, and pass on everything you've worked so hard to build. I'm your host, David Gravelle. I'm a life insurance strategist, business legacy coach, and founder of Legacy Protectors. Each episode, I sit down with the bold thinkers, entrepreneurs, and everyday visionaries who are turning their values into lasting impact in business, in life, and across generations. Joshua is a published author and certified profit coach who has dedicated his career to helping small businesses unlock their revenue earning potential. As a nationally recognized business growth strategist, he specializes in identifying six-figure opportunities in small businesses using no-cost strategies that can increase profit immediately. With his extensive experience working with the Small Business Administration, Joshua has conducted numerous seminars and workshops for startups and established businesses alike. His expertise spans strategic planning, operational efficiency, and developing repeatable business growth methodology. So welcome, Joshua Gragnani, to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great, David. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And first off, I love your shirt. Wanted to give a shout out to that. Just a fantastic expression of your personality. And in the background, I'll just call attention to our viewers to the books that you've written, and we'll get to that in a moment. But that's what you're seeing in the background there for Joshua. So again, thanks for joining us. Let's get started with learning a bit about what it was like growing up. Tell us where you're born and what your young life was like, Joshua.
That's a fantastic question that nobody ever really asks me anymore, but it's an interesting response. So I grew up in a little town called Tranquility, which is about 758 people. I don't think that population has probably changed in the last 40 years. It's one of those rural towns out west in California in such an area of great density in agriculture. That's what we're known for out here. It's a small town outside of a small town that's outside of Fresno, if anybody knows where that's at.
Okay, great. And what was life like growing up there? Were you on a farm? Were you, what were you interested in, arts or sports, or what were your activities?
Well, certainly, we did grow up on a farm. So we played in the mud. That was, when kids still played outside, that's what we did. Played a fair amount of sports. Did Pop Warner, Little League. I wrestled in high school. I ran cross country, that kind of stuff. I did a lot of academics. I was in the FFA, in the 4-H, and did, that's very popular out here. But, I was president of the math team, and, I was a little a foot in both worlds, we'll say, which made me a big fish in a small pond.
Right.
It
so
had
how did you reconcile that? Yeah. How did you reconcile that? How did you kind of scratch both itches? Because I'm sure you felt some sort of family farm draw, as well as, wanted to chase your, kind of your talents. Let's call it.
Well, I probably reconciled by overcompensating. Okay. Right. Because that's the truth. When I did well in high school and in elementary school. And when I got to college, I blew off some of my responsibilities. And I didn't take things as seriously. And I bounced around a bit between a few different colleges. And I kind of, I went to the workforce. But little did I know that later in my life, I would reflect on that chain of events, which led me into an area that I'm in now and have been. Not all things are bad. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Right. That lived experience sounds like it's a big draw in your work now. And talk a bit about that journey if you can. What were some of the struggles, it must have given you some resilience. What did you learn? If you could share with our audience some nuggets from that.
Well, to give a broad overview, okay, my family out here and a lot of my friends growing up in their families, farming is very big. Okay. Um, all my friends and my cousins worked for their parents at the family farms. And my father and my uncle farmed together when I was young, but when I was about 10 years old or so, there was a really big drought situation and a lot of bankruptcies going on with in California. It was a big deal. I mean, we went and picketed in Sacramento during those times. And this was way before climate change was even a word then, but things were happening.
Right.
And so,
and that was for water rights. Is that correct?
Water rights.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is still a thing today.
Sure is. That's right.
Sure.
Still unsettled. Yeah.
And so, my father and my uncle decided to close up the farm, and my dad took a job teaching shop class at the high school that he went to high school at, replacing his shop teacher, who was like 70 something years old by then. But it's just, small town, right? Small world and those kind of things. So I didn't inherit really any land in that way. And of course, I was probably resentful for that for a little while, not directly to my father, but just the situation,
Right. Right.
And some people get an easy meal ticket, we would say. But later in my life, when I found to be scrappy and get creative and ingenuitous, we would say, at trying to write my own way and figure stuff out.
Right.
Really started very small and subtle, but all those things are how that we built the pyramids, right? The highest layers are the hardest to get to, but I now attribute a lot of my success, in quotes, success, as you define it, but progress, we'll say, in my life and my career, because of the tribulations of the things that I had to overcome in some ways, has definitely served me well in the long run.
Right. So talk a bit about that educational journey that you were on. How did you, take what was started off as, let's say, an affinity towards studies and to math in particular, it sounded like. How did you continue to, find ways to challenge yourself and to teach yourself the things that you wanted to be good at and learn and use as tools?
Okay, well, I started off originally taking some engineering. And I kind of had really wanted to lean towards the computer science in that time. But again, like I said, I wasn't spending enough time in my studies to really whittle that down. And so I changed schools. I was at a school that was very, very specific. Like, if you do not go, we make you leave. And I went to a school where it was really just down the street from the other one, but they had a bit more leniency in vocational type trainings. It was more about what that they were going to give us the ability to do than just getting, completing the course on the thing. And I started taking a lot of vocational classes around IT, computer engineering, network technology. And I ended up in the IT field for about 10 years as a contractor for Hewlett Packard on and off. Now, again, I can tie that back to what I was saying about being on my own, as in not working for the family business and trying to figure out my own way. I got picked up very early as a independent contractor for field service. I was the field rep for all of the Central Coast in California, trying to service IT's installations, school districts, governments, big networks and stuff. But I just thought it was fun at the time.
Right.
Okay. What I didn't realize was after years of doing that, and then I ended up shifting industries later and getting into transportation, where I again became an independent contractor. And then eventually when I came to own my own business, and I later had several businesses, I look back on my career,
Yeah.
you know, in the corporate world, and
Sure.
almost all of my career, I was independent in some way or another. So even though I may have been a contractor in some ways and didn't really view it as being in business, now I'm specifically a contractor as a business,
Right.
and that's the business model. So it led me to be maybe a non-conformist of some things, we would
Sure.
say. I
Sure.
definitely have made a impression on many people as that in my life for various different reasons,
Right.
professional and personal. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Shirt included. Right. So,
Yes.
so talk about that journey then a little bit more on, where did the writing come in, and how does that intertwine with, starting and running a business now? What's driving you on both those fronts?
Okay. So, um, everybody has this journey, and not everybody experiences it the same way. So, disregard the fact of what that I was classified as, but the type of work that I did brought me into contact with large corporations. Okay. So I was working with national companies, right? Hewlett Packard International, that kind of stuff, and working on a project where I was part of this. I was a cog in this big machine, but my eyes were always open and my ears were always listening, and I was learning about the hierarchy. And I could only see in my little area here, but understanding how that all that stuff worked, because prior to the 90s, I learned how to use a computer when it was only two colors.
Right. Yeah.
And we used to be able to get work on our Word that we knew what we were doing, or by recommendations. I have worked on this and that kind of stuff. But these kids were coming out with these hotshot degrees that didn't exist before. It was becoming very saturated, and suddenly we didn't pay anymore. And in order to get up to a management level, you needed a degree, which I hadn't finished, and all that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
But what I was doing was learning industry in a way, and I didn't always think of it that way at a time. And I was picking up a job here and a job there and part-time work and different things. And I was floating around, say, okay. And I ended up with one job this one time with a company that did recalls for products, right? Lumps in the baby food, or magnets dislodging, or that kind of stuff. But I was part of, if anybody remembers, the big recall for all the dog food that was killing pets, was in the late 2000s, 2008, 9, something like that, 7. Anyway, that was a big deal. But what it did was introduce me to the backroom inventory and stocking stuff and things. So I would go into literally sometimes my own local store, and I would come in and say, I need to go into your stock room and I need to check your inventory and stuff, right? And I need to get to talk to a manager, a supervisor, about how you guys place this materials and what this means. And I was learning all this back stuff. So I actually account one of those things in my book was I did a job where I worked at Best Buy. Okay, I installed all their cash registers, and Best Buy doesn't have a back stock room. What's on the shelves is what they have. That's their business model. Now, I don't know if people commonly know that. So I wrote about it in my book, right? They have a distribution center, and everything is just-in-time delivery. And they service 250 locations on the West Coast and all the online orders from one warehouse. The warehouse happens to be over here in California, which I later coincidentally ended up doing another job at for a different company. And I was able to go into the warehouse, and it's just an experience. Okay. So I'm learning stuff about how business is conducted and transacted. And again, I took a job as a web programmer for a small startup at the time, who I worked for a guy. He was famous. He was a child prodigy, went to law school when he was like 12. He was a poker player. This was back in 2005 when poker was super big.
Right. Booming.
And I just did his web pages, right?
Yeah.
But all these things in the journey didn't occur to me, or wasn't like my plan at the time. But again, it has led me to be independent of thought and aware of all levels of things. And the perspective gives me a much better understanding of later as being a business owner. Okay. Because you never know what you're going to need to know for later, but you have to catalog that information because it could become useful.
Right. And so, tell us a bit about your writing. What was some of the books or the first book that you wrote, and, what spurred you to write more?
I started on writing a book that I really got inspired during my graduate program at Fresno State. Okay. The Craig School of Business is internationally accredited at the same at the same level as Harvard Business School. Okay. It's not as well known over here in California, but everybody knows Go Bulldogs, right? Because we are a Division I football team. That's what we're known for. One of the, and I would gotta say there were some classes that were up and down, but one of the ones that, and I slightly agree, was one of the classes that wasn't exciting. I'd say, if I venture so far to say it was kind of boring, was the human resources class. Okay. But the guy who had 30 plus more years of experience in the field and he's a doctor level professor of human resources. I felt his passion that he had for his people, and the integrity that he had and how much that he cared. And I really got to find in myself something I never identified before about the necessity for employee development. Okay. And I always thought that was somebody else's department, right? That's not my problem and those kind of things. But I really realized stuff that I kind of had been doing the whole time, or thoughts that I had, and I never really classified it as that. And I think back to my first business, which is I quit my job. And the guy that I worked with says, you know what, I'm going to quit too, and I'm going to come and work for you. And he was my first employee. And I realized when his wife invited me to dinner and to have dinner with the family and stuff, how much of an impact that I was making on every one of their lives, not just the one, not just him that he worked for me. The whole family was relying on me, making sure to get his paycheck every week. Okay. And I've always carried that with me in all the other businesses that I've had and grown. So when this professor started deep diving into how that it was so important, and I was enthralled. Like I said, it may have snoozed a few other of the people in the class because it wasn't particularly exciting stuff, but it was meaningful stuff. It was very deep and passionate. And I said, I'm going to write a book on managing people. I'm going to write a book on, and I know there's a lot of leadership books out there. And so it's not really that. It's from a small business perspective, how to manage your team, how to get your goal across. And maybe to get that goal, you need to find out what your employees' goals are, what their personal motivations are. And then you also need to explain to them what the corporate alignment is, what the corporate's goal is, okay? Because if you can identify those two things, you can find out what that they can align. And so the book that I wrote is, it's called the Small Business Leadership Handbook. And it can also be applied, because I thought this is also as vitally important. Any of those practical advice or the tips or the understanding how you do it can be applied to the corporate level, because many people get promoted to a supervisor position and they may not have been trained on managing a team of other people, but now suddenly you're on the hook for accomplishing whatever that team's goal is. So how do you get people to do what you need them to do when they come from different lives, different families, different experiences, different needs? The bigger the group, the more diverse it is, and trying to understand that and then connect with people in order to accomplish, because that's really a supervisor's mission, right?
Right.
You can't do all the work yourself. You need to get everybody else to be on board with you.
That's it. And it's completely misunderstood until you're living that job. And I'll speak to my own experience. When I first became a manager, I had to learn it was about the people. When you're working for someone your whole career, it's rare that you're able to completely put yourself in their shoes and understand their world. You have a lot of gripes by being an Indian, and you kind of take a lot of shots among your team at the chief. But when you take on that leadership role, it opens your eyes to a lot of things. And so having resources like that is crucial for all new leaders. And is that still available, Joshua? Is that we're going to put a link in the description for people to find that book?
Yes, that one is on Amazon. Okay.
We'll do that.
It is not on my bookshelf right now. We are redesigning the cover because the pages for the increased version, we did a reformat, so the sizes are out, but you can get it on Amazon. It's easy to download. The Small Business Leadership Handbook. Okay. But what that book did was show me how it was possible to have that kind of impact. Okay, because suddenly the stuff that I've learned along the way was able to be shared with other people, so many other small business owners, and tell me that the things that I talk about and the things that I do are lacking in many areas. So over the years, I've become a consultant for the SBA. I do SBDC, which is a branch of the SBA Small Business Development Center. I do coaching for businesses around the university as well as the SBA and some of the regional banks, and I do one-on-one stuff. So if you ask me a question this week and you ask me next week, you may get two different answers. So that it implored me to start chronicling so much of my knowledge into a more systematic approach, a more realistic advice type. And so that's this book that's here, this Money Machine, which I'm in the process of writing a follow-up to right now. Okay. I wrote this one a few years ago, and it was a shorter write, and I put all the stuff out there, and it's really great. These principles in the book are universal, we'll say, for most businesses and most times. This is not a before COVID and after COVID thing. It's are you thinking about things intentionally and strategic and planning and David, as you know, the right messaging. There's a lot of things that are in the book, but I am writing the volume 2 of that to really give more gravity to certain things that I've found are so important. After discussing what's in my book with many other business owners, I've interviewed hundreds of owners or managing partners of businesses to find out that everybody does this or nobody does this. And why does nobody do this? And where is the missed opportunities? And, people tell me all the time, wow, it's so simple. I never stopped to think about it.
Right.
I say, yeah, it is so simple.
Really good stuff is.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah, the best stuff is really simple to grasp and to explain and to implement. If you're lucky, you're able to do all three successfully. Okay, so any other books that we want to share with our audience besides those two that you'd want to make sure that they had a chance to check out?
Yeah, well, you know what? Always, I get a lot of people to ask me about Bible trivia. I did that as a side project. It was actually really fun. And it's my hottest selling book on Amazon by far. And so I didn't predict it that way, but people find it very useful. You can also find that on Amazon. I don't exclusively print to Amazon. I do have a few small bookstores. I'm trying to get in some libraries. So I have to get approved by Congress to get into the library system, but it's a process. I also give other people advice on writing their books. If anybody's interested in writing a book, what was told to me as I found to write my first one was just throw up on the page and don't look back. Okay, and don't look back until you get to the end, and then edit it and clean it up, because it's just getting it started and getting over the hump. And don't be afraid of what's there. The first page is not necessarily going to be the greatest, but you can't get to the greatest page if you don't start with the first couple.
Right. Good advice. So how do people find you, Joshua? Where's a good place for them to go learn more about what you're doing? Maybe a website or contact information? Yes.
Message me on LinkedIn. That's my number one thing. Yeah. I'm always very active on not really so much on all the other socials, and not as much as I should be. But LinkedIn is my place. You can find me at 4gpublishingcompany.com. That's the number 4, the letter G. And of course, you can always email or text me. We're going to put some of the stuff into the show notes, links away the contact. Also, you can look me up on Amazon as well.
Okay. So again, thanks for talking to us today. And that gets us to really the impetus of the whole conversation, which is, you've had this journey, you've had a life well lived, it sounds like, to a point where you've got some time to reflect on where you've gone and some time still to continue the legacy you're building. So, what is it that you'd hope to be known for and to leave behind for everyone?
So in the small businesses that I help, when they succeed, I succeed. Okay. Because I found that that's where that I now have the greatest impact on no longer my employees and my businesses. Now I can help several businesses and their several employees. Right. And so it's the impact that I make on having all those people succeed. That's the impact that I want.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to inspiring and helping some more people, hopefully through this episode. So get in touch with Joshua. And thanks again for joining us. We'll look forward to having you back on in the future. Thank you to our listeners and audience for spending time with us today on Legacy Curious. I hope this conversation gave you some insight, encouragement, or just that little spark you needed to keep you moving forward in your own legacy journey. If you got value from today's episode, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else who's building something that matters. And if you're ready to take that next step, protecting your business, planning for retirement, or passing on your legacy with purpose, head to legacyprotectors.life to schedule a conversation. Until next time, I'm your host, David Gravelle, reminding you to stay curious, stay committed, and keep building something worth passing on.